Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She stood at the edge of the room, silent, her uniform pressed to perfection, her boots polished to regulation shine, and yet the officers passed her by as if she were invisible. Maybe that was the point. Maybe she wanted it that way. On the flight line, under the scorching desert sun, she looked like just another crew member. Sweat darkened the collar of her jacket, grease smudged her cheek, and her hands were steady as she loaded another Hellfire missile onto the Apache's wing. Around her, engines roared and men shouted over the din, but she moved with an economy of motion that made her presence almost vanish into the chaos. No one asked her name, no one asked her story. She was simply Sergeant Leo if anyone bothered, which they usually didn't. To most, she was just another maintenance sergeant, a grease monkey whose place was beneath the machines rather than beside the soldiers who flew them. But when her jacket shifted, the commander walking past suddenly froze. His eyes locked on the faint outline of a patch beneath her collar, an insignia, one so classified only a handful of people alive had the right to wear it. And in that moment, the noise of the flight line seemed to vanish. He said nothing, not yet, but his gaze lingered longer than she would have liked. Leo adjusted her jacket, tugged the fabric back into place, and returned to her work. Her fingers tightened a loose wire that could have led to misfire, her jaw set in its usual mask of silence. The pilots who flew this Apache would never know how many errors she fixed. They would chalk every bull's to their own skill, never realizing a woman they dismissed had saved their lives long before they took off. A soldier bumped into her deliberately as he passed. "Watch it, Ghost," he muttered, his tone half joking, half mocking. The others laughed. "Careful, she might not even be real. Haven't heard her say 10 words since she got here." Leo didn't react, not with her face, not with her body. She had learned long ago that silence was its own weapon. She tightened the bolt, tested the harness, and moved on. But inside there was a flicker. Not of anger, not even of pride, something else. A heaviness that came from being underestimated too many times to count. It was safer, she reminded herself. Better to be dismissed than noticed. Still, when she caught her reflection in the polished metal of the missile casing, the question whispered back at her. How much longer can you keep this mask in place? The heat pressed down harder as the hours stretched on. Most soldiers sought shade, but Leo kept working. She noticed a faint vibration in the Apache's cannon system. It wasn't due for maintenance yet, but something felt wrong. She crouched, tools in hand, tracing the fault line to a fatigued bracket. If it failed mid-flight, the entire system would collapse. She fixed it quietly, without paperwork, without credit. The pilots would never know how close they came to catastrophe. "Sergeant," a voice barked. "Major," his expression was tight, disapproving. "That system, not on today's schedule. Stick to protocol." Leo straightened, her face calm, her voice low but steady. "Preventative check, sir. I noticed an anomaly yesterday." The major frowned. The pilots didn't report anything. "They wouldn't have felt it unless they knew what to look for," she replied. That answer didn't sit well. His jaw clenched. "Do not exceed your authority again, Sergeant. We have schedules for a reason." "Yes, sir." He walked away. She returned to work, and another small piece of the mask tightened over her features. By nightfall, the desert sky burned orange and violet as the Apache she had labored over lifted into the air. Leo watched from her narrow window as it rose into the horizon, its movement smoother now, safer now, because of her hidden intervention. She didn't smile, not outwardly, but her chest rose once with quiet satisfaction. In her room, a converted storage closet, she sat on her narrow bed and reached beneath her pillow. A photograph, edges worn from years of folding and unfolding. She studied it only briefly before tucking it away again. Then came the notebook, a slim ledger filled with coded observations, base personnel, patrol schedules, communication patterns. She scribbled fresh notes with steady hands, then concealed it again, vanishing her secrets back into the shadows. A knock came at her door. Her pulse quickened, but her face didn't show it. She slid the notebook away, composed herself, and opened the door. Commander stood there. A man with eyes like stone, weathered by decades of combat. His reputation carried weight across every theater of war. He was not a man easily impressed or easily fooled. "Sergeant," he said, his voice level. "Commander," she straightened to attention. He asked to come in. She let him. His gaze swept across the room. No photographs on the walls, no trinkets, no decorations. Just a bed, a locker, boots lined with military precision. "You've been here 6 weeks," he said finally. "Transferred from Joint Base. Mostly stateside maintenance before that, correct?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't reciting facts. He was fitting pieces together. "Your records show perfect inspections. The Apache you service has the highest readiness on base. No errors, no failures. Just doing my job, sir." "Funny thing," he continued, his voice sharpening. "Major tells me you were inspecting the M230 chain gun this morning. Specialized work, not in your scope. I noticed a vibration during yesterday's flight, sir. Thought it best to check." "And you found something?" "Bracket fatigue reinforced it." His eyes narrowed. "That kind of subtle issue usually takes specialists hours to diagnose. You found it in minutes." "I've worked on similar systems before, sir." Silence stretched. His eyes drilled into hers as if searching for a crack in the mask. She gave him nothing. Finally, he shifted. "There's a mission tomorrow morning. High priority. I want you personally on weapons checks." "Yes, sir." He paused at the door. "One more thing. The crew quarters are miserable in this heat. I can move you to main barracks." "This is adequate for my needs, sir. I prefer the quiet." A flicker crossed his face, something like recognition or suspicion. "Very well, Sergeant, carry on." When he left, Leo stood alone in her room, the desert night pressing in through the small window. Her pulse slowed, but her mind did not. Commander was sharper than she expected. He had seen the insignia. He had noticed the cracks in her story. She turned her gaze back to the horizon. The Apache she had repaired earlier was returning, its silhouette framed against the last light of day. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new questions, and she would remain what she had always been here, invisible. Because invisibility was the point. It was the mission. For now, she was just a maintenance sergeant, just a face in the background. But she knew the truth. And soon so would they. Why was she in the room at all? That was the unspoken question when Sergeant entered the Tactical Operations Center at dawn. The officers glanced back at her, surprise flickering across their faces. Briefings weren't for grease-stained mechanics. They were for men in crisp uniforms with bars on their collars, men who made decisions instead of turning wrenches. She kept to the back of the room, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. Her uniform was clean, her boots polished, but still she carried the mark of an outsider. Her silence made the others uncomfortable. She knew it. She felt it. Commander's eyes found her in the crowd. He gave the faintest nod, subtle, controlled. Permission or perhaps warning. Began, his voice firm enough to cut through the low murmur. "And Sergeant," his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary, "we have a critical situation." The room fell still. The lights dimmed, the screen illuminated, and a topographical map lit the wall. Jagged mountains, narrow valleys, dangerous terrain. Leo knew it well. She had studied every inch of this border region since her arrival, though none here knew that. "A diplomatic convoy will move through this northern valley tomorrow at 0900, said. "Our task is aerial security during its most vulnerable passage." Murmurs stirred. One officer major stepped forward. "With respect, sir, that's routine escort work. Why the high security classification?" His gaze swept the room. "Because," he said, each word deliberate, "we have reason to believe there is a leak in our command. Enemy ambushes have been too precise. Yesterday's was no accident. A ripple of unease spread across the room. Leo kept her expression neutral, though inside, the confirmation was both expected and heavy. A leak, not a guess, a fact. Captain shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. Are you saying someone in this room compromised operational security? I'm saying, replied, that I intend for tomorrow's mission to succeed without casualties. That means anticipating betrayal as well as the enemy. The map shifted, routes lit up in red and green. To Apache, continued. Alpha will run low along this ravine. Bravo will maintain high cover, staggered formation, overlapping fields of fire. Leo's eyes tracked the route, her mind calculating angles, coverage, blind spots. Something about it unsettled her. Too predictable, too vulnerable. And then she saw it, a gap in coverage. A gap only someone like her would notice. She hesitated. Speaking here would draw eyes, questions, suspicion. But silence could mean lives lost. Her voice broke the stillness like a sharp crack. Permission to offer a technical assessment, sir. Every head turned. It was the first time many had heard her voice at all. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. Proceed, Sergeant. Leo stepped forward, her movements controlled but certain. She pointed at the map. The proposed route requires both aircraft to run at maximum sensor range. After yesterday's engagement, Alpha's forward sensor array is damaged. That creates a blind quadrant here, northwest. Major's voice cut in, irritated. This is a tactical briefing, Sergeant, not a maintenance meeting. Let her speak, said quietly. Leo's hand traced the terrain lines, highlighting subtle ridges and valleys. Damage patterns suggest the enemy is using advanced portable anti-air systems. Their targeting locks are too adaptive for standard evasive maneuvers. If we configure the sensors for overlapping cycles instead of continuous sweep, we create irregular coverage patterns, enough to break lock, enough to expose enemy positions without exposing the aircraft. The room went silent. What she proposed wasn't in any manual, it wasn't standard doctrine, and it wasn't something a maintenance sergeant should know. Captain Davenport was the first to break the silence. She's right. We ran something similar in 2 years back, saved our entire unit. His voice carried weight. His respect wasn't given lightly. Eyes shifted. Doubts turned into grudging acknowledgement. His gaze didn't leave her. And you believe you can implement this before tomorrow? Yes, sir. The hardware is ready. I'll need secure access to programming modules. You'll have it. He turned back to the room. Captain Davenport, you'll fly Alpha. Lieutenant, you have Bravo. Mission rehearsal tonight with the modified package. Dismissed. Chairs scraped. Officers whispered. They left with hurried footsteps, but Leo stayed rooted. When the room cleared, locked the door. He moved slowly, deliberately to the control panel, shutting down the recording systems. Then he faced her. That, he said finally, was not the voice of a maintenance sergeant. Leo's pulse steadied, her breathing even. I observe patterns, sir. He studied her in silence. Then, with a tone that carried both curiosity and suspicion, he said, Last night I made inquiries through channels that do not officially exist. I found nothing. Nothing about you. But this morning I received a message from Central Command. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It instructed me to give you whatever you require. No questions asked. Care to explain why? Her mask held, though inside her chest a storm raged. How much did he already know? How much could she risk revealing? Commander, she said finally, her tone low, this convoy isn't what you think. It isn't diplomats. He didn't flinch. I suspected as much. It's a decoy, she continued. The real asset is elsewhere. What's moving through tomorrow is bait. And someone here, her eyes flicked toward the door, someone in your command will try to compromise it. The silence between them thickened. Jaw tightened. You're here to find the leak. Leo met his eyes steadily. Yes, sir. He looked at her for a long moment, then asked the question she had hoped he wouldn't. "That insignia," he said. "The one I saw beneath your collar, what is it?" Her hand moved slowly to her pocket. She a small metallic emblem, a stylized ghost etched over the number 7. She set it on the table between them. His eyes widened just slightly. He whispered the name like an echo, Ghost 7. For the first time since arriving at this base, Leo felt the mask shift. Not off, never off, but looser, because now someone else knew. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we find your traitor." Why did Captain arrive late? That was the first question that lodged in Leo's mind as she stood at the flight line, her hands busy with tools but her eyes watching everything. It wasn't the kind of lateness that could be excused by a missing document or a delayed breakfast. It was the kind that carried weight, a tremor in his hand, a sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cool morning air. Small signs, but Leo had lived her life by small signs. The mission was simple on paper. 2 Apache would escort the convoy. Their sensors, modified by her own hand, would feed data back to the command consoles. Each console had a slightly different pattern, subtle, almost invisible, enough that, if compromised, she would know exactly whose feed had been leaked. It was a net, and she was waiting for the fish to thrash. Her movements appeared routine, but every calibration carried a second meaning. Adjusting the targeting modules wasn't just maintenance, it was embedding her trap. Modifying the software wasn't just efficiency, it was planting signatures. Each keystroke was both a repair and a revelation waiting to happen. Private Zimmerman hovered nearby, fascinated. "How do you even know where to start?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow as he passed her tools. Leo didn't look up. "You listen. Machines talk if you know how to hear them." He chuckled, not realizing she meant it, because to her everything spoke. The rattle in a rotor blade, the hesitation in an officer's words, the glance that lingered too long. When she tightened the last bolt and sealed the final access panel, she stood back. Both Apache gleamed in the rising sun, deadly birds waiting for flight. But their silence carried another truth. Today they weren't weapons. They were bait. By evening the base pulsed with preparation. Officers briefed pilots. Soldiers checked weapons. The air smelled of jet fuel and dust. Conversations buzzed with forced confidence, but Leo caught undercurrents of unease. She sat alone in the mess hall, her tray untouched. Around her, laughter and banter filled the room. To them, tomorrow was just another mission. To her, tomorrow was the moment masks would fall. Her eyes tracked the officers subtly, each movement. Captain's laughter was too loud, his gestures too sharp. Major avoided the mechanics, his focus narrowed to issuing clipped orders. Lieutenant checked his tablet again and again, as though needing reassurance. They were all suspects, all shadows. From across the room, Commander watched her. Their gazes met. No words passed, but the understanding did. He would watch the men, she would watch the data. Together, they would find the crack. Later in her quarters, Leo locked the door and retrieved the hidden device from the air vent. A secure communicator, small and untraceable. She typed quickly, fingers steady, words concise. Asset arriving via alternate channel. Trap set. Containment protocol ready. The reply came almost instantly. Confirmed. Ghost 7. Execute with extreme prejudice. She destroyed the message, then sat on the bed in silence. The desert outside was quiet, save for the distant hum of generators and the occasional bark of a dog. Tomorrow, that silence would shatter. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. The mask was heavy tonight, heavier than usual, perhaps because had seen through it. Perhaps because, for the first time in years, she wasn't entirely invisible. Her mind wandered to the photograph beneath her pillow, the one she refused to look at for more than a few seconds at a time. A reminder of why she did this, of who she once was, the person she could never be again. Sleep came in fragments, restless, uneasy. And when dawn finally came, it carried with it the weight of inevitability. At 7:30, the crews assembled on the tarmac. Engines hummed, rotors spun lazily, preparing to roar to life. Leo moved with precision, running her hands over panels, testing circuits, calling out final clearances. "Systems optimal, Captain," she told Davenport, her voice calm. "Sensor modifications complete." He nodded with genuine respect. "Excellent work, Sergeant. Yesterday you probably saved us. I won't forget it." She moved on to aircraft. He barely acknowledged her, eyes glued to his tablet, lips pressed thin. "Targeting systems calibrated. Sensor package operating at 98% efficiency," she reported. "Will that be sufficient?" he asked, his tone clipped. "More than sufficient. The variance is intentional." He gave a curt nod, returning to his data, but Leo caught the twitch at his temple, the slight tremor in his hand. Fear or guilt? Across the tarmac arrived at last. Too late, too polished. His eyes darted, scanning, calculating. His voice boomed louder than necessary as he repeated mission parameters to the crews. "Waypoints Alpha through Echo. Expect contact at Charlie. Maintain overwatch at all times." Leo watched closely. Each officer's console displayed slightly different projections. Only she knew which was which. Only she knew which data or would carry into the fight. The trap was set. Engines roared to life. Twin Apache lifted into the morning sky, blades tearing the stillness into thunder. Dust swirled around the tarmac, whipping at uniforms, stinging eyes. Leo stepped back into the shadow of the hangar, her gaze locked on the departing aircraft. Commander appeared beside her. His expression was stone, his voice low. "Maintenance bay, now." They walked in silence, boots striking the ground in rhythm with the fatting thrum of rotors. Inside the cavernous hangar, locked the doors, activated a jammer and turned to face her. "3 minutes after launch," he said, his tone flat. "Access to secure channel. Frequency not on mission brief. Signal went to an enemy relay station." Leo didn't blink. Content. "Encrypted but source confirmed. His personal tablet." She moved to the console, fingers dancing across the keys. The tactical display lit up. Then he transmitted his unique blind spot. "The enemy will move into those positions." Her voice was calm, but inside something twisted. A leak confirmed, a betrayal made real. "What now?" asked. She entered another command, activating a hidden channel. "Ghost 6, this is Ghost 7. Execute Phase 2. A crisp reply came through. "Ghost 6 copies." His eyes narrowed. "What's Phase 2? Leo didn't look up. "There is no convoy. Never was. Special operations teams are waiting in each blind spot. When the enemy shows, we'll know exactly who fed them the data." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "You're not just catching, you're exposing the entire network." "Exactly." On the screen, new signals appeared. Beacons from hidden teams. Then came the flood, enemy units moving into ambush positions, exactly as predicted. "Ghost 6 reports contact," Leo said softly, watching the display. "Targets emerging exactly on data. Engagement in progress. No risk to our aircraft." Exhaled, the sound heavy. "You used him." Her eyes stayed on the screen. Better him than 30 more men walking into another ambush. Minutes passed. Engagement markers flared, then dimmed. Finally, a voice came over the channel. "Ghost 6, all targets neutralized, 12 prisoners, no casualties." Leo leaned back slightly. One piece of the mission complete, the enemy exposed, the traitor confirmed. But the trap wasn't done closing, not yet. "Now," she murmured, "we see who contacts when the plan collapses." Why did look so nervous when his boots hit the tarmac? That was the first thing Leo noticed as the Apache descended. Rotors slowing, dust clouds spiraling outward across the flight line. From a distance, it looked like any other mission return. 2 aircraft down safe. crews stepping off with helmets tucked under their arms, voices raised in post-flight chatter, relief threaded through the ranks. No contact, no losses, routine. But Leo's eyes weren't on Davenport, who walked tall and calm, reporting crisply to Commander. Her eyes were on. His movements were jerky, unbalanced. His gaze flicked too quickly from face to face. And when Davenport announced in a clear voice, convoy proceeded through all waypoints without incident. Heads snapped so sharply that even the ground crew turned to look. The panic was there just for a fraction of a second. A widening of the eyes, a tightening of the mouth. Then gone, smoothed away beneath layers of military training. But Leo had seen it, and so had. "Excellent work," told Davenport, nodding once before turning his gaze on. "Lieutenant, your assessment." Hesitated just a beat, just long enough. "Concur with Captain Davenport, sir. Mission proceeded as planned. No hostile contact." Leo felt the air change. Tension threading through silence, invisible but suffocating. "Both crews report for debrief," ordered, his voice calm, betraying nothing. "Maintenance teams commence post-flight." The group dispersed. Conversations resumed, forced and shallow, but didn't head to debrief. His steps carried him off course just slightly toward the communications building. Leo followed. Not openly, not quickly. Like a shadow, silent, unobtrusive, always a step behind but never far. She felt the shift in her own body as she walked. The mask she wore, the quiet, overlooked mechanic, began to slide away. Something sharper, older, truer rose in its place. Inside the communications center, moved with purpose, though his breathing betrayed him. He bypassed 2 terminals, heading straight for the secure console at the rear. Fingers flew over the keys. Desperation gave him speed, not caution. Leo stepped out from between the rows of equipment. Her voice cut through the silence. "Problem, Lieutenant." Jolted like he'd been shot. His hand moved instinctively toward his sidearm but froze when he saw her. Just a sergeant. Just a woman in oil-stained fatigues. Yet the calm in her eyes unsettled him more than a weapon drawn. "This is a restricted area," he snapped, his voice strained. "During debrief only authorized." "Is it?" she asked softly, walking closer. "I thought you might need help. Communications can be temperamental after flight ops." Suspicion flickered in his gaze, clashing with fear. "I don't need maintenance. Return to your station." "I'm exactly where I need to be." Her tone shifted, no longer deferential, no longer overlooked. It carried something different now, a weight, a precision. Hand twitched again toward his weapon, but Leo was faster. She stepped in, seizing his wrist in a precise grip. Pressure points lit fire through his nerves. His knees buckled, a sharp gasp tearing from his throat as pain dropped him toward the floor. "Lieutenant," she said evenly, her voice controlled even as his breath turned ragged, "you are being detained on suspicion of treason and espionage." The door opened. Commander entered with 2 armed security officers. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried the knowledge of a man who had just watched a mask fall away. "You don't have the authority," spat, still straining against her grip. "She's just a—" Leo released him, standing tall. From her jacket she the small metallic emblem. She held it steady, letting the faint overhead lights catch on the stylized ghost. Face drained of color. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The Phantom Protocol, it's just a myth." "And yet," Leo replied softly, "here we are." The guards hauled him to his feet, securing restraints as he cursed and shouted, his voice cracking with panic. But the room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. Watched in silence, then said, "Captain is also being detained. Attempted unauthorized comms access immediately after 2 leaks." Leo nodded once, pieces sliding into place. The network was wider than one man. 2 officers feeding different fragments of information. No wonder the enemy always seemed 2 steps ahead. "What now?" asked. Leo's gaze moved to the secure systems in the corner, then back to him. Now I complete my primary mission. There's a facility beneath this base. Hidden, unrecorded, I need access. His eyes narrowed. How do you know about that? Because that's what I came to secure. For the first time since she'd met him, his composure cracked, not in weakness but in astonishment. The prototype, he said slowly. That's why they wanted access, not the convoy, the technology. Correct. The weight of it hung heavy in the room. The leak wasn't just about troop movements or patrols. It was about power, a weapon system hidden beneath their feet. Show me, said. They walked together across the base. Soldiers stared as they passed, whispers trailing behind them. Rumors already bloomed, wildfire spreading through dry grass. Men who had mocked her days ago now fell silent. Some even saluted. Major, standing near the hangar, snapped to attention when she passed. Is it true? A young private whispered nearby. Is she really Ghost 7? Show some respect, barked. You're in the presence of a legend. Leo didn't react, not outwardly, she couldn't. Legends were dangerous. Legends couldn't afford to be real. At the far edge of the base, they entered a nondescript building. To the eye, a maintenance shed, but entered a sequence into a hidden panel. Steel doors hissed open, revealing a reinforced stairwell descending into shadow. The air grew cooler as they moved down. Concrete walls, heavy security doors, layers of secrecy peeled back with every step. I never thought I'd actually meet one of you, said quietly, his voice carrying respect, not fear. The stories Kandahar, the 12, I thought they were myths. Leo's footsteps echoed softly. The best operations are the ones no one believes, because then no one looks for them. At the bottom, a vault waited, heavy steel, red lights glowing in its frame. Entered the last sequence, then stepped aside as the door unlocked with a low groan. Inside, the future waited, a prototype guidance system that could change battlefields forever, hidden, coveted, worth betrayal. Leo stepped inside, her shadow falling long across the chamber floor. For a moment she let herself feel it, the culmination of weeks in silence, of being dismissed, of hiding behind grease and sweat. The mission was intact, the leaks exposed, the prototype secured. But she also knew this was only the midpoint, not the end. Because when she disappeared tomorrow, Sargent would vanish like smoke. Ghost 7 would remain nothing more than a whispered name. And dignity would remain in silence. Why did the air feel heavier underground? Had asked himself that question before, but never like this. The stairwell descended far below the surface, concrete swallowing sound, steel doors closing behind them with finality. Each level stripped away more of the ordinary world until nothing remained but the hum of generators and the silence of secrets. Leo walked ahead, her boots striking the metal steps with calm precision. The same woman who had spent weeks bending over Apache engines, smudged with oil and sweat, now moved with the bearing of someone who belonged in places like this. Shadowed corridors, classified vaults, rooms that didn't exist on any blueprint. Studied her as they walked, the faint glint of the insignia she'd shown him still etched into his mind. Ghost 7. He had thought it a story, something whispered in mess halls to keep rookies alert. But stories didn't walk beside you in flesh and blood. The final door loomed ahead, massive, its edges glowing faintly red. Entered the sequence. Locks disengaged with mechanical growls, one after another, until the door shifted inward. The vault breathed cold air as it opened, sterile and sharp. Inside, the chamber was stark. A single object dominated the space, a long, reinforced case resting on a pedestal, warnings stenciled across its surface. To most, it might have looked unremarkable. To those who knew, it was a fault line that could fracture wars. Leo approached it without hesitation. She ran her hand lightly along the metal casing, as though confirming its presence with touch alone. "Still here," she murmured. "What exactly am I looking at?" asked. She glanced at him. A prototype guidance system, next generation, adaptive, unlike anything else in the field. His jaw tightened, and if it fell into the wrong hands? Her gaze didn't waver. It already almost did. Silence pressed down on them, for the truth fell into place like puzzle pieces. The leaks, the ambushes, the desperate precision of enemy strikes. They weren't just after patrol schedules. They wanted this, the power to redirect wars. "You've been here all along for this," he said. "And to identify who was feeding information out," Leo added. Folded his arms. "You've known since you arrived." "Suspected," she corrected. "Knowing and proving aren't the same. It had to be undeniable. Today made it undeniable." He studied her in the sterile light. "And after this, what happens to you?" She paused. Her hand rested on the case, her eyes distant. "After this, Sergeant disappears. Transfer orders, paperwork buried. Another name, another role somewhere else. Ghost 7 doesn't stay." Her words carried no bitterness, only fact, but beneath them caught something else, a fracture in the armor. "Doesn't it get heavy?" he asked quietly. "What?" "Living like that, always invisible, never known." Leo's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked around the pedestal, checking the locks, the seals, the systems monitoring the case. Her silence was answer enough. Waited. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than speech. Finally, she spoke. "Being underestimated keeps me alive. Being forgotten keeps others alive. The weight is irrelevant." But he heard it, the quiet echo at the end of her words. The weight was not irrelevant, not entirely. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You remind me of men I've lost, good men who carried too much alone. They thought silence was strength. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a burden no one survives." Her eyes lifted to his, steady, controlled, but behind them for just an instant something broke, a flicker of weariness, a human cost rarely admitted. Then it was gone. "Commander," she said, her voice composed again, "our priority is extraction. This system must be moved to secure channels before anyone else tries to breach it." "Agreed." She reached into her pocket, producing a data card, encrypted, its markings unfamiliar even to. "This authorizes me to transfer control. Signed by names you recognize. Don't ask to see them. You'll sleep better if you don't." He gave a dry huff. "I stopped sleeping well 20 years ago." A faint smile ghosted across her lips, gone almost before it formed. Together, they secured the case, attaching reinforced locks and preparing it for transport. The silence stretched, filled only by the echo of tools and the hum of systems, but beneath the practical motions lay a current of reflection. For the question burned. How many times had someone like her walked past him in a hallway, invisible, carrying missions he'd never know about? How many lives had been saved by hands that left no signature? For Leo, another question pressed heavier. How many more missions could she carry before she broke under the silence? When they finished, spoke again. "The men out there, they'll tell stories now. They'll whisper about what they saw, about you. Some will believe, some won't. Is that part of the plan?" Leo locked the final seal and straightened. "Legends are useful. They travel further than orders, but legends aren't people. They don't eat, sleep, or bleed. They don't feel. They don't break. That's why legends survive when people can't." Her words lingered in the cold chamber. Regarded her with something close to respect, and something heavier, sorrow perhaps, for what such a life cost. Finally he asked, "And what do I call you now?" Her answer was simple, "Sergeant until I'm gone." The vault sealed behind them as they left, the weight of steel and secrets locking into place. Back in the world above, whispers spread like smoke. Soldiers who once ignored her now turned their heads, eyes filled with questions. A few saluted openly. A few watched in silence, unsure. None mocked. Not anymore. Leo ignored them all. She walked with the same steady pace she had always carried, but inside she felt the difference. She had been seen, truly seen, and that was more dangerous than any weapon in the vault. As they neared the surface, the desert wind hit her face again, carrying dust and heat. She inhaled slowly, letting the weight settle back on her shoulders. The mission wasn't finished. The leaks were sealed, the prototype secured, but the exit still waited. Until then, the mask had to remain in place. Sometimes survival depended not on being strong, not on being feared, not even on being respected. Sometimes survival depended on being forgotten. And dignity didn't speak, it endured. Why did the air on base feel different after the arrests? Leo felt it the moment she stepped back above ground. It wasn't louder or quieter, not exactly. But the atmosphere had shifted like a storm cloud that everyone could feel but no one could name. Soldiers lingered longer in hallways. Conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her. For 6 weeks she had been invisible. Now suddenly she was not. She hated it. Whispers trailed behind her footsteps. Is it true she's Ghost 7? The Phantom Protocol real? Some voices held awe, others disbelief, and a few fear. But all shared the same weight, attention. And attention was dangerous. Commander walked at her side, his face carved from stone. He didn't need to tell her he noticed it too. Men who once mocked her now saluted sharply. Others stiffened as she passed, pretending not to stare. Rumors spread faster than fire in dry brush. At the mess hall that evening, the stares intensified. Leo carried her tray to her usual corner, but silence followed her like a shadow. Tables that once laughed and shouted now hushed as she sat. For the first time, people seemed aware of her presence. A private leaned toward his companion, whispering, "That's her, Kandahar, the 12." Leo's jaw tightened. She set her fork down and stared at her untouched food. She could almost feel their eyes pressing against her skin. She had built her survival on being overlooked, on being dismissed. Now the spotlight burned. Joined her table without asking. He set down his tray, his presence heavy but steady, like an anchor in turbulent water. "You don't like the attention," he said plainly. Her eyes flicked up at him, cool but sharp. "Attention gets people killed." He nodded once, acknowledging the truth. "You've shaken their world. People cling to myths until they become flesh. Then they don't know whether to salute or run." She pushed the food aside. "Tomorrow I'll be gone. That will solve their problem." "And yours?" Her gaze hardened. "I don't have problems, I have missions." The silence stretched. Around them, soldiers tried and failed to appear casual, sneaking glances between mouthfuls of food. Finally said quietly, "The prototype leaves at dawn. Transport team arrives 0500. I'll see to the escort myself." Leo studied him. His offer wasn't procedure. It was loyalty, protection, maybe even something more human, respect. "You don't have to," she said. "Yes," he replied, "I do." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood, leaving the tray behind, walking out into the desert night. The air was cooler now, stars scattered across the sky in cold brilliance. She walked the perimeter in silence, boots crunching over gravel. Each step gave her time to think. Too much time. She remembered the photograph under her pillow. A face she once knew. A past she could never reclaim. She had buried that person long ago under layers of aliases, missions, masks, but the weight of it pressed harder tonight. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and seen more than the mask. That thought unsettled her more than any firefight. At the far fence line, a young private on guard snapped to attention when she approached. His salute was shaky, nervous. "At ease," she murmured, her voice soft. "Yes, ma'am." The title stung. She was ma'am, not here, not ever, yet myths reshaped reality. She turned back toward the base, her gaze sweeping the buildings. In the dim light, the place looked fragile, cracks already exposed, 2 officers rotting in cells, others shaken, doubting each other, And tomorrow, when she left, the whispers would grow louder. Myths always did. Back in her quarters, she sat on the narrow bed, pulling the photograph from beneath her pillow. Her fingers traced its edges. She stared only for a moment before tucking it away again. Then she reached for the hidden notebook. She wrote a final entry, code flowing easily, leak identified, secondary compromised, prototype secured, extraction imminent. Closing the notebook, she pressed her hands against its cover for a long moment. Then she returned it to its hiding place. Sleep was fractured again. Dreams came sharp and restless, fragments of faces, missions, shadows that refused to leave her alone. She woke before dawn, eyes open in darkness, heart steady but heavy. By 0500, the transport team arrived. Armored vehicles lined the hangar, engines idling, exhaust fumes mixing with desert air. The case containing the prototype sat secured in reinforced clamps, its surface gleaming dully in the floodlights. Was already there, issuing clipped orders, his voice calm but firm. When he saw her, he nodded once. "Convoy departs in 20 minutes, he said. She checked the locks on the case herself, running her hands over seals she had inspected twice already. No mistakes allowed, no second chances. Soldiers moved around her, some deliberately avoiding her eyes, others staring openly. The whispers had not stopped. They would not stop. As the sun broke over the horizon, flooding the desert in gold, the convoy rolled out. Engines growled, tires crushed sand, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than ever. Leo rode in silence, her gaze scanning the horizon. Every ridge, every shadow, every possibility calculated in. Because betrayal had already walked these halls once, and shadows had a way of lingering. And somewhere deep inside her, the question whispered again. How much longer could she carry the mask before it broke? Why did the desert feel so quiet that morning? The convoy pushed forward, engines rumbling low, tires crunching sand. Heat shimmered off the horizon, though the sun had barely risen. The silence wasn't peace. It was waiting. Leo sat in the armored vehicle closest to the prototype case, her rifle resting against her knee. Her eyes scanned constantly, never lingering, always moving. Every ridge, every rock formation, every shadow. She measured them, tested them against instinct. Beside her, Commander rode in silence. His posture was steady, his gaze fixed forward. But she could sense his tension, the kind of tension that comes not from fear of what's ahead, but from knowing it's inevitable. "They'll try again," he said quietly. "They already are," Leo replied. She nodded toward the horizon. A hawk circled high above, its wings rigid in the still air. Nature moved differently when danger approached. "You ever get tired of being right?" asked. Leo's lips curved faintly, almost a smile, almost not. "Being right isn't the point. Staying alive is." He gave a short huff, more breath than laugh. Then silence returned, heavy and thick. The convoy reached a narrow stretch, ridges rising steep on either side, the kind of terrain she had warned about too many times to count. The perfect kill zone. Her hand tightened slightly on her weapon. "Eyes up," she murmured. And then it came. The first strike tore into the lead vehicle, a plume of dust and fire exploding skyward. Shouts erupted. Engines roared as drivers swerved, tires skidding on loose sand. Gunfire cracked from the ridges above, echoing like thunder in a canyon. Chaos, but not for her. Leo's mind slowed, each detail sharp, precise. She saw muzzle flashes on the left ridge, the arc of incoming fire, the angles of cover. Calculations turned into instinct, instinct into action. "Contact left," barked, his weapon already up, rounds snapping into the rock face. Leo was already moving, sliding from her seat into the sand, her rifle raised. She dropped to one knee, steady breath, steady hands. One shot, a figure fell from the ridge. Second shot, silence from another muzzle. The ambush was fierce but sloppy. Desperation, not strategy. The enemy had been fed bad intel. They thought they were striking weakness. Instead, they had walked into a trap reinforced by Ghost Protocol. Still, Sloppy could kill. A rocket-propelled grenade hissed across the convoy, striking a vehicle in the rear. Shrapnel tore through the air, clanging against armor. Soldiers ducked, shouting orders. Smoke clouded the battlefield, turning daylight into haze. Leo moved through it like water, every step deliberate, every decision cold. Cover here, fire there, move again. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't fearless, she was efficient. Her eyes cut across the ridge line, and then she saw him. Not in a cell where he was supposed to be, not bound, not guarded, standing atop the ridge, radio in hand, his voice carrying as he shouted coordinates into the storm. Her jaw clenched. Betrayal wasn't over, it was alive. She said under her breath. Followed her gaze, his face hardened. Impossible, he was secured. Not well enough. For the first time, her mask cracked, not from fear, but from anger. Not at the bullets, not at the rockets, but at the cost of negligence. How many more had to die because men underestimated the enemy within? She raised her rifle, centering him in her scope. Her finger rested on the trigger. She could end it here. A single pull, clean, final. But she hesitated. Killing him now would silence him, but it wouldn't reveal how he had escaped, who had freed him, who else was compromised. Her mind split in two, the soldier demanding the shot, the operative demanding patience. His voice cut low beside her, "Do it." She didn't, not yet. Instead, she shifted fire, suppressing the ridge line, buying time for the convoy to regroup. "Secure the case," she shouted, her voice sharp, carrying authority that made men move without question. They pulled the prototype vehicle into formation. Armor locked down, defensive perimeter forming. The convoy held. Disappeared into the smoke, slipping from sight. Leo's breath slowed, her finger easing from the trigger. Fury burned beneath her ribs, but discipline held it there. She would find him. She would make it count, but not at the cost of the mission. Minutes stretched, gunfire thinned. The enemy realized too late the trap had closed on them. Ghost 6 teams, hidden and patient, struck from flanking positions. One by one, the ambushers fell silent. When the last echo faded, the desert returned to its eerie stillness. Smoke drifted. Flames flickered. The smell of cordite and sand filled the air. Leo stood, dust clinging to her uniform, her eyes scanning the ridges. No sign of. She lowered her weapon, her chest rising with controlled breaths. Around her, soldiers moved to secure the wounded, extinguish fires, reset the convoy. Their eyes kept flicking to her, not with mockery now, not with dismissal, but with something heavier. Respect. Approached, his expression grim. He shouldn't have been out there. "No," Leo replied. Her voice was flat, but her eyes burned. "Which means someone else opened his cell." The words lingered, heavier than the smoke. The betrayal wasn't sealed. The network wasn't done. She turned back toward the convoy, where the prototype case remained intact, locked and secured. The mission lived, but the war inside their own walls was far from over. And in that moment, as she wiped grit from her brow, Leo felt the weight settle deeper than before. Because survival wasn't just about winning battles. It was about surviving the shadows of your own side. And dignity was not in killing the traitor, not yet. Dignity was in holding your fire even when your heart begged otherwise. Why wasn't the base celebrating? The convoy had returned intact. The prototype was secured. The ambush had failed. By any measure of combat, it was a success. But the air on forward operating base Epsilon was heavy, filled not with triumph but unease. Because victories meant little when shadows still lingered. Leo walked through the motor pool, her boots carrying dust and silence with her. Around her, soldiers moved with deliberate purpose, unloading, repairing, cleaning weapons. Their eyes flicked to her and away again. Not mocking, not dismissing, not even curious anymore. Something different now. Something almost reverent. She ignored it. Reverence was as dangerous as contempt. Inside the operations building, the light was dim, the air cool. Commander stood over a table of reports, his face set in lines of exhaustion. He looked up when she entered. "Prisoners from the ambush are in holding," he said. "Most are low-level fighters, they knew nothing, just coordinates and timing." And his jaw tightened. Gone, vanished into the ridges. Search teams found tracks, but they ended at a dried riverbed. He had help, vehicles staged. Someone planned his escape. Leo's expression didn't change, but inside the fury was a steady flame. "Then the leak isn't sealed. Not fully." Shook his head. "No, but we cut deep, enough to cripple their network for now." For now, the words echoed. Temporary victories, temporary safety. The cycle never ended. "Where?" Leo asked. "Still in custody. He hasn't spoken, but he was the sharper blade." She nodded once, absorbing it. The pattern was clear. One traitor silenced, one escaped, one prototype secured. The balance was fragile. Silence stretched, studied her carefully. "What happens now?" Leo's gaze shifted to the window, where the desert stretched endless and empty. "Now I leave." "You think it's over?" Her voice was soft, but it carried steel. "It's never over, but my part here is finished." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You saved this base. You exposed traitors I didn't see under my nose. You stopped an ambush that would killed us all. Don't tell me it's nothing." She turned back to him. Her eyes were steady, her mask intact, but her silence spoke louder than words. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Two soldiers who had walked different roads, meeting in a place neither had chosen. Finally she spoke. "Command will reassign me. A new name, a new face, a new mission. You'll receive transfer papers in the morning. Sergeant will vanish." Exhaled slowly, the weight of inevitability pressing on him. "And Ghost 7 remains a rumor." Her lips curved faintly. "Exactly." The next hours moved quietly. She packed what little she owned. A pair of boots, a uniform, a notebook tucked into its hidden compartment. The photograph she slid into her breast pocket, close to her heart. Outside, the base pulsed with restless energy. Men whispered about her in corners, half afraid she might hear. But she didn't stop them. She let the myth grow. At dusk, she walked to the hangar. The prototype was being loaded into a secure transport aircraft, engines humming, floodlights cutting through the fatting sky. She inspected the seals one final time, her hands running over the reinforced casing. Satisfied, she stepped back. Appeared at her side, his expression unreadable. For once, he didn't speak. He just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as the cargo was secured. When the aircraft finally lifted, roaring into the night, they watched in silence until its lights disappeared beyond the horizon. Only then did he say, "It's been an honor." She turned to him, her eyes catching the last traces of light. "The honor has been mine, Commander." No salute, no handshake, just words and the weight of what they carried. Later, in the dark quiet of her quarters, Leo sat on the bed for the last time. The room was bare, empty of her presence. Tomorrow, another soldier would move in, never knowing who had slept there. She pulled the photograph from her pocket, looked at it longer than usual, then tucked it away again. The mask was heavy. It always would be, but it was hers to carry. At dawn, a transport lifted off from the airstrip. No fanfare, no send-off, just another body in another uniform boarding a plane. By midday, Sergeant's name had already begun to fade from rosters. By nightfall, she would not exist at all. And yet in the mess hall, whispers lingered. In the motor pool, stories grew. In the barracks, men spoke her name in hushed voices. Ghost 7. The phantom who had appeared, revealed a traitor, saved the mission, and vanished. The truth didn't matter. Myths rarely cared about truth. What mattered was the silence she left behind. because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts and disappears.